"You're not a real mother," he sneered as they loaded my kids into the car. Then, at the next council meeting, he learned who signs his permits. The county SUV was already idling at my curb when Chuck folded his arms across his polo shirt and said it, loud enough for the whole block to hear. "You're not a real mother, Nor. You just collect a check." The words came out over the whine of the CPS worker's clipboard pen and the smell of scorched hot dogs from somebody's grill 3 houses down, and my daughter, my foster daughter, 7 years old, missing a front tooth, was already halfway into the back seat with her light-up sneakers dangling above the asphalt. Her little brother had his face pressed to the window glass. I could see his breath fogging it. Behind me, a chainsaw was eating through the cedar fence I had built with my own 2 hands, because Chuck had reported it as a setback violation the same morning he called the hotline, and a code inspector had shown up with the CPS car like they'd carpooled. My knees wanted to buckle. I did not let them. What Chuck didn't know, what none of them standing on that August lawn knew, was that I had spent 11 years quietly earning the one seat in that city where his whole future would eventually have to pass through my hands. He thought he was watching a nobody get what she deserved. Let me tell you how far back the wrong file went and how it opened. I grew up on the wrong end of Belmont Avenue, here in Fresno, in a stucco duplex with a swamp cooler that rattled like a dying lawnmower. My mother cleaned rooms at the Piccadilly Inn for $6.75 an hour and raised 4 of us on it. I learned early that paper is power, that a receipt, a lease, a signed form kept in a shoebox was the difference between getting pushed around and standing your ground. My mother lost an apartment once because she couldn't produce a rent record the landlord had forgotten. I watched her cry over that. I was 9. I decided then that I would never be the person without the document. So I became the person with all of them. I went to Fresno City College at night, got an associate's in public administration, then a bachelor's from Fresno State in 2009, while working days at the county assessor's office logging parcel data. I know what a lot line is. I know what a variance is. I know that a house is not really yours until the paper says so. The deed, the permit, the certificate of occupancy. I spent a decade learning the bones of how this city gets built, one boring application at a time, and I was good at the boring parts. In 2016, the mayor's office appointed me to a volunteer seat on the City Planning Commission, the 7-person body that votes on zoning variances and conditional use permits. Nobody at a barbecue is impressed by that. It doesn't pay. You sit through 4-hour meetings arguing about parking ratios. But it meant that when a builder wanted to break the rules, build bigger than the code allows, closer to the property line than the code allows, they had to come to my table and ask. I never bragged about it. On my street, I was just Noor from the corner house, the one with the good lemon tree and too many kids in the yard. I bought that corner house on Adeline in 2013 for $187,000, a 1,340-square-foot ranch with a sagging porch and orange shag carpet from 1974. I gutted it slowly, cash as I had it, and in 2019 I got licensed as a resource parent, foster care, because my own mother had fostered 2 boys after we were grown, and I had seen what a safe bed does for a scared kid. My caseworker was Lourdes Vega, a broad-shouldered woman with reading glasses on a beaded chain and a laugh you could hear through a closed door. Lourdes placed Mateo with me first. He was 4, wouldn't speak for the first 3 weeks, flinched at raised hands. Then his half-sister Ruby, when she turned 5. By 2023, I was deep into the paperwork to adopt them both. Ruby called me Mama Noor. Mateo called me nothing for a long time, and then one Tuesday called me Mom, like it was the most obvious word in the language, and I had to go stand in the pantry for a minute. On the kitchen windowsill above the sink sat a hand-crank egg timer, cream-colored plastic shaped like a little hen, that my mother had given me the day I closed on the house. You twisted the head to set the minutes. It had one flaw. It always stuck at the 2-minute mark. You'd crank it to 4, walk away, and it would jam at 2 and sit there humming, going nowhere, until you came back and gave it a thump. My mother said, "It's like you, mija. It looks stuck." It isn't. I kept it because eggs, and because of her, and because there is something honest about a thing that hums along quietly and refuses to quit. Chuck Renner moved in next door in the fall of 2021. He drove a black Ram 2500 with a windshield banner and paid, I later learned from the public record, $412,000 for the property, a knockdown he never intended to keep. The first year, he was fine, waved, brought over a 6-pack when the Bulldogs beat San Diego State. He owned 3 car washes and talked about them constantly, about scaling, about how the little guys in this city didn't understand leverage. He'd stand in his driveway with his phone on speaker and negotiate with contractors at 8 in the morning. Loud. But loud isn't a crime, and for a while I told myself that a loud neighbor was a small tax on a good street. The first wrong note came in March 2022. Chuck tore down the original house and started drawing up plans for something the neighbors would come to call the Renner Compound, a 2-story, 4,900 square foot new build with a rooftop deck on a lot zoned for single-story residential up to a 35% lot coverage. His design covered closer to 52%. To do that legally, he'd need a variance, permission from the city to break the coverage and height rules. He'd need it to come to my commission. I knew that in March. I said nothing. It wasn't my job to tip him off, and it wasn't a conflict yet because he hadn't filed. I just filed the fact away, the way my mother taught me, in the shoebox in my mind. The second wrong note, the fence. There was an old cedar privacy fence between our lots on the property line, and it was rotting. In the summer of 2022, I pulled a survey. I'm a public records animal, it's a reflex, and confirmed the line ran 2 inches inside where the old fence stood, on my side. So I tore out the rot, and I built a new 6-foot cedar fence, by hand, over 4 weekends, set fully on my own property with a 2-inch reveal to spare. I pulled a fence permit number, inspection, the whole thing. I did it right, because I always do it right. Chuck watched me sink the posts and said, "You didn't have to go and do all that." I thought it was a compliment. It wasn't. His plans called for a 0 lot line garage on that exact edge, and my brand new, permitted, perfectly legal fence was suddenly in the way of the thing he wanted to build over the line. The third wrong note? The kids. Mateo that spring was in a phase, 6 years old, all elbows, obsessed with a plastic t-ball set. He'd whack the ball and it would sail into Chuck's yard, and Mateo would freeze, terrified, because in his first home, a mistake meant a belt. I taught him to walk over, knock, and ask for it back. The first time, Chuck handed it over fine. The third time, he kept it. "Kids need to learn consequences," he told me over the fence, smiling. "Course, they're not really yours, are they? Foster." He said the word like it tasted bad. I said, "They're mine in every way that counts, Chuck," and I took the t-ball ball out of his recycling bin that night, because it was ours, and because I don't leave things that are mine in another man's trash. That was the pattern, all through 2022 and into 2023. Small cruelties dressed as jokes. He'd rev the Ram at 6 a.m. under Ruby's window. He complained to the HOA. We didn't even have a real HOA, just a Facebook group and a retired mail carrier named Denise who took it too seriously, that my unlicensed daycare was lowering values. I ran no daycare. I had 2 children and a lemon tree. He called the non-emergency police line twice about screaming, which was Ruby on a trampoline being a 5-year-old on a trampoline. Each time an officer came, looked at my clean house and my calm kids and my permits framed, yes, framed, in the hallway, and left apologizing. Each time I wrote down the date, the officer's name, the badge number. Shoebox, shoebox, shoebox. Lourdes noticed. During a home visit in January 2023, she watched Chuck stand in his driveway filming us with his phone while Mateo did chalk drawings on our own sidewalk. She lowered her reading glasses. "That man is building a case in his head," she said. "Keep your paper, Noor." I told her I always keep my paper. She didn't laugh that time. The boiling point came on August 12, 2023. It was a Saturday. Ruby had a loose tooth, and Mateo had a fever of 100.2 that I was treating with children's Motrin and a cool washcloth and the exact patience CPS trains you to have. At 9:40 that morning, a county SUV pulled up. ACPS, Emergency Response Worker, young, nervous, name of Kayla, doing her job off a hotline tip, told me there'd been a report, that I left the children unsupervised, that there was a man in and out of the house, that Mateo had unexplained bruises. Every word was a lie stacked on a lie. The bruises were from T-ball and a scabbed knee, documented at his last pediatric visit on July 30th. The man in and out was my brother Sammy, who'd come by twice to fix my garbage disposal. The unsupervised claim was invented whole. And at the exact same hour because he'd timed it, a city code inspector arrived to red-tag my fence off an anonymous complaint that it encroached the setback, which it did not, which I could prove with the survey and the permit in about 90 seconds. But a red tag means a saw, and a saw was already running. Here is the part I will never scrub out of my memory. As Kayla, following protocol on an active report, walked my 2 crying children toward the county car for a welfare interview, Chuck stood on his lawn in a Fresno State polo with a lawn care company's logo on the chest, arms crossed, and he grinned. He'd made the call. Both calls. He wanted my fence gone and my lot quiet and my unlicensed daycare shut down so his variants would sail through a cleaner block. And he'd decided that the fastest way to move me was to take my children and my fence in one morning. "You're not a real mother," he said, loud for the neighbors. "You just collect a check." The chainsaw bit into the second cedar post. Ruby screamed for me through the glass. I did not scream back. I want you to understand that. I stood on my own lawn in wet socks because I'd run out through the sprinkler, and I made myself as still and as cold as the survey line under the grass. Because screaming is what he wanted, and because I already knew, even in that worst hour, exactly which table Chuck's whole future was going to have to cross. I called 2 people that afternoon, once the kids were verified safe and Kayla, to her credit, had already started to look sick about the evidence. First, I called Lourdes. Second, I called Bennett. Lourdes came within the hour, off the clock, still in her Saturday clothes. She looked at the CPS referral number, at Mateo's pediatric records, at my incident log, 19 entries, dated, with badge numbers, and she said something I'll keep the rest of my life. "Baby, I have read 4,000 of these files. I know a real mother from a paper complaint in 1 page. Then she got official. She flagged the report for what it plainly was, a malicious retaliatory referral, a felony under California Penal Code Section 11,172 for a knowingly false report of child abuse. She requested the hotline audio. In this county, the calls are recorded. She wanted the voice. Bennett I'd known for 6 years. He wasn't my lawyer exactly. Bennett was a city attorney, a deputy in the city attorney's office who advised the planning commission, the man who sat at the end of our dais and told us dryly when something was legal and when it would get us sued. Careful man, bow ties, kept a tin of butterscotch in his briefcase. I did not call Bennett to ask him to bend anything. I would never, and he would have hung up on me if I had. I called Bennett to ask one clean question. If a builder with a pending variance application files a knowingly false report against a sitting commissioner to influence her property and her standing, what is the commission's obligation? There was a long pause. I heard the butterscotch tin click shut. The obligation, Bennett said, is to put every fact on the record, in public, and let the law do exactly what the law does. Bring me your paper, Noor. I brought my paper. That's the thing Chuck never understood about me. He thought the fight would be a shouting match, and I don't shout, I file. Over the next 9 weeks, August into October 2023, I did nothing loud and everything permanent. First, the CPS side. Lourdes pulled the hotline recording. It was Chuck. He hadn't even bothered to block his number. The call came from the cell that appeared on his own car wash website. On the tape, he described the foster woman's boyfriend coming and going, and bruises, specifics he could only have invented, and this is the part that finished him. He said, unprompted, and her fence is over the line too. Somebody should get code out there. One call, both complaints, in his own voice, tying the child abuse lie to the fence he wanted torn down, motive gift-wrapped. The investigation against me was closed as unfounded on September 6, 2023. A cross-referral was opened against Chuck. Kayla, the young worker, wrote a supplemental statement describing his demeanor on my lawn. She didn't have to. She did anyway. She's a good one. Second, the fence. I pulled my permit, number, inspection sign-off dated July 2022, and the boundary survey, stamped by a licensed surveyor, showing my fence set 2 inches inside my own line. I filed a claim with the city for the wrongful red tag and the destruction of $2,800 in permitted inspected cedar, with photographs, with the inspector's own report that had cited a setback that legally did not apply to a fence. The city's risk office doesn't like paying for its own inspector acting on a false complaint. That claim would settle, but I wasn't in a hurry to cash it. I had bigger paper coming. Third, and this is where I moved like the surveyor's line, slow and exact. On September 19, 2023, Chuck Renner formally filed his variance application, case number ZV-2023-0417, requesting relief from single-story height limits and from the 35% lot coverage cap to build his 4,900 square foot, 2-story compound at 52% coverage with a 0 lot line garage. A garage whose foundation, per his own site plan, was drawn 11 inches over the property line onto my land. His whole build depended on that one approval. Without the variance, the design was dead. He'd already demolished the original house and poured nothing, sitting on a $412,000 dirt lot and a construction loan meter running at, a contractor friend estimated, better than $3,100 a month in interest and holding costs. And the body that had to approve that variance was the 7-member City Planning Commission. I did the honest thing, the only thing. I went to Bennett, and I recused nothing improperly and hid nothing. I disclosed, in writing, on the record, that I was the adjoining property owner and the target of the applicant's conduct, and I asked the city attorney's office to rule on whether I could sit on the item at all. Here's what most people don't understand about a conflict of interest. Disclosing it and following the law is not the same as hiding it. Bennett's office reviewed it for 3 weeks. Their determination, issued October 6th, because the matter was a quasi-judicial public hearing on the objective merits of a code variance, not a vote where I stood to gain money, I was not required to recuse, provided I disclosed the relationship on the record and decided strictly on the zoning facts, which is exactly, precisely, what I intended to do. I didn't need to bend a single rule to bury Chuck. The rules, applied honestly, buried him all by themselves. His build broke the code by 17 points of coverage and a full story of height and 11 inches of my dirt. The law was going to say no to that on the merits in any universe. The only thing my seat changed was that I'd be the one to say it to his face. I told Lourdes the plan over enchiladas at her kitchen table. She set down her fork. "So he called the city on your fence," she said slowly, "not knowing you are the city." I said, "I'm 1/7 of it, and I follow the rules. That's worse for him than if I broke them." She started laughing and couldn't stop. That laugh you could hear through a closed door, and Ruby came running in to find out what was funny, and I picked her up and we didn't tell her. The hearing on ZV-2023-0417 was set for the Commission's regular meeting on Wednesday, October 25, 2023, 6 p.m., in Council Chambers at City Hall on P Street. But the reveal? The part where the whole street learned who Chuck had actually picked a fight with, that happened 2 days earlier at the neighborhood block party. Our street throws a fall block party every year on the last Saturday before Halloween. Barricades at both ends of Adeline, folding tables, Denise, the retired mail carrier, running a chili cook-off with a laminated scorecard, kids in early costumes, a bounce house someone rents. October 21st, 2023. Chuck came, of course. He worked the party like a campaign, shaking hands, telling anyone who'd listen that the new build's gonna raise everybody's values, just gotta get past the paper pushers at the city Wednesday. He actually said that. Paper pushers. He was standing by the chili table in a fresh polo, holding a printout of his own rendering, the rooftop deck, the whole 4,900 square feet, showing it around like a man passing out cigars. He didn't see me come up behind him with Bennett. Bennett had come to the block party because his niece lived 2 doors down, a genuine coincidence I have thanked God for since, and because I'd asked him to be present when I said, once, in public, the thing I had every right to say. I wasn't going to make a scene. I was going to make a record. There's a difference, and Chuck was about to learn it. "Chuck," I said. He turned, grinning that grin, the chili cook-off crowd half listening. "Noor, no hard feelings, right? Business is business." He waved the rendering. "You'll love the new place. Adds value for everybody." "I want to make sure you know something before Wednesday," I said, "because I'd hate for you to be surprised in a public meeting." My voice was even, cold as the line under the grass. "You filed variance case ZV-2023-0417. It goes to the City Planning Commission this Wednesday at 6. I sit on that commission. I've sat on it since 2016. I watched it hit him. It went through his face in stages, like a light dimming on a rheostat. The grin first, then the color, then something behind the eyes. Denise's laminated scorecard stopped moving. A kid's kazoo went quiet. "You're on the," he started. "I'm the adjoining property owner," I said, "and I'm a sitting commissioner, and I've already disclosed both facts in writing to the city attorney's office. This is Deputy City Attorney Bennett. He'll confirm that I followed every rule to the letter. I didn't have to break one." Bennett gave a small, dry nod and said, "That's accurate. Ms. Haddad disclosed the relationship on September 21st and requested a formal conflict review. The office issued its determination October 6th. Butterscotch calm, devastating. "Your build," I went on, and now I let it land slow, because he had grinned while my daughter screamed through a car window, and I am only human, covers 52% of your lot. Code allows 35. You want a full second story in a single-story zone, and your garage foundation, per your own site plan, is drawn 11 inches onto my property. My property, Chuck. The one with the fence you had cut down. The fence I built 2 inches inside my own line, with a permit, with an inspection. I have the survey. I have the permit. I have the recording of you calling the county on my children and my fence in the same 90-second phone call, in your own voice, from the cell number on your car wash website. I said it plainly, no heat now, just fact stacked on fact the way my mother stacked receipts. You said I wasn't a real mother. You said I just collect a check. Wednesday, at the next council meeting, I'm going to sit at that dais as the commissioner who decides whether your $400,000 hole in the ground ever becomes a house. And I'm going to decide it strictly on the code. You should bring a lawyer. Nobody at that chili table said a word. Then Denise, retired mail carrier, keeper of the laminated scorecard, set down her clipboard and started to clap. Slow at first. Then the man from 4412 joined, then the couple with the twins, then somebody by the bounce house who didn't even know the details but knew a cornered bully when he saw one. Chuck's rendering shook in his hand. He folded it in half, badly, and left the party without entering his chili. Wednesday, October 25th, 2023, Council Chambers. Item 7 on the agenda, ZV-2023-0417, applicant Charles Renner. I want to be careful how I tell this, because the truth is more brutal than any speech would have been, and it's the truth that finished him. I disclosed on the record, exactly as Bennett's office required, that I was the adjoining owner, that the applicant had filed a false report against me, that the city attorney had cleared me to hear the item on its objective merits. I offered, on the record, to recuse if the applicant preferred a different commissioner. Chuck's own hastily hired lawyer, a nervous man in a gray suit who plainly wished he were anywhere else, conferred with his client and declined the recusal because Chuck, arrogant to the last, still thought he could win the room. He could not read a staff report. I could. The city's own planning staff had already recommended denial. That's the part people forget in the drama of it. I didn't have to be the villain of his story. The professional planners, in a report dated October 18th, recommended the Commission deny ZV-2023-0417 on 4 independent grounds: excessive lot coverage, height incompatibility, no demonstrated hardship unique to the property, the hardship being entirely self-created since he demolished a conforming house, and an encroachment onto the adjoining parcel. 4 grounds. Any one of them is fatal to a variance under state law. A variance in California requires special circumstances not created by the applicant, and Chuck had bulldozed his own. I let the other commissioners speak first. I let staff present. I let Chuck's lawyer make his weak case about neighborhood character and investment, while Chuck sat in the second row with his arms crossed, the exact way he'd cross them on my lawn, and I watched the arrogance drain out of his posture minute by minute as it dawned on him that no amount of grinning moves a building code. When it came to me, I did not lecture. Bennett had told me, "Bring your paper, let the law do what the law does." And I did. On the 4 findings required for a variance, I said into the microphone, reading from the staff report and the municipal code, the applicant fails all 4. There is no special circumstance not created by the applicant. He demolished a conforming structure. The requested coverage of 52% exceeds the 35% cap by 17 points. The height introduces a full second story into a single-story zone with no compatibility mitigation. And the site plan places the garage foundation 11 inches over the adjoining property line, which the applicant does not own and cannot build upon. I move to adopt the staff recommendation and deny variance case ZV-2023-0417, and I direct that the existing red tag on the site remain in force until a conforming permit is issued. Bennett confirmed the motion was proper. It was seconded by Commissioner Okafor. The vote was 6-1. The one was a commissioner who abstained, then voted aye by mistake and had to be corrected. Even the sympathy vote wasn't real. Denied, Red tag affirmed. Chuck's 4,900 square foot compound died in a public meeting, on the record, on the merits, by his own hand, at exactly the table he'd sneered about. He stood up too fast, and his chair scraped the floor with a sound like the chainsaw, and for 1 second I thought he'd shout. He didn't. Cowards don't, when the mask is off and the room is full and the paper is against them. He looked at me across the chamber. I was up on the dais, nameplate in front of me, Commissioner Haddad, and whatever he saw there made him close his mouth. His lawyer took his elbow. They left. In the hallway, I heard later, Chuck asked the man what it would cost to redesign to code, and the answer was, a conforming single-story house on that lot tops out around 2,400 square feet, less than half of what he'd bulldozed and borrowed against. And every month he waited, the construction loan ate another $3,100. He'd spent a fortune to build a monument to himself, and the law had handed him back a smaller house than the one he'd destroyed. The CPS cross-referral against him went forward separately. In February 2024, he pleaded no contest to filing a false report under Penal Code 11,172, paid a fine, and drew probation, a permanent, public, searchable record for the man who'd told a street I wasn't a real mother. The city settled my fence claim for $6,400. I used part of it to rebuild the fence, again by hand, again 2 inches inside my own line, again with a permit. Some things you rebuild exactly as they were, on purpose, so everyone can see they didn't get to take it. Chuck sold the dirt lot in June 2024 for $358,000, $54,000 less than he'd paid, before the holding costs, before the legal fees, before the loan interest that had been chewing at him the whole time. A young couple bought it, a nurse and a high school teacher, and built a tidy single story that fits the code and the street. They have a baby now. Chuck moved to Clovis. I do not know his address, and I have not once looked it up. And if you knew how much of a public records animal I am, you'd understand what a discipline that is. Here's the part I actually keep. Mateo's and Ruby's adoption finalized on April 9, 2024, in a courtroom on Van Ness, with Judge Alarcon presiding and Lourdes in the second row in her good blazer, crying without any glasses to hide behind. The kids are legally, permanently, in every way that counts, mine. Mateo Haddad, Ruby Haddad, on the amended birth certificates, on the deed to the house as my heirs, on the emergency card at Volters Elementary. Everything on that corner lot on Arolina is legally, unbreakably ours. The house I bought for $187,000 and made worth twice that with my own hands. The lemon tree, the twice-built fence, the loose teeth in a jar, the chalk on the sidewalk that no one films anymore. We had a party of our own the Saturday after the adoption, not a block party, a small one. Lourdes came with a tres leches cake. Bennett came, bow tie and a tin of butterscotch that Ruby emptied in 9 minutes. Denise came with her laminated scorecard, retired now from chili judging, promoted to permanent honorary aunt. Kayla, the young CPS worker who wrote the statement she didn't have to write, came too, and Mateo showed her his t-ball swing in the exact yard where he'd once been afraid to fetch a ball. I was in the kitchen boiling eggs for Ruby, who had decided at 8 years old that she only likes them cooked exactly medium, Mama, not runny, not chalky. I cranked the little cream-colored hen timer on the windowsill, twisted its head to 4 minutes the way I have 10,000 times, and set it down, and it did what it always does. It stuck at 2. Humming, going nowhere, refusing to quit. My mother's voice, gone 3 years now. It looks stuck. It isn't. I left it humming and went back to my people, to the cake and the butterscotch and Lord This's laugh coming through the screen door, and I let it sit there on the sill doing its patient, stubborn work, because I had learned a long time ago that the things that hum quietly and won't stop are the things that win. There was a knock months later. I'll fold it in here because it's the true last beat. October again, 2024, the block party season. Chuck, of all people, on my porch, hat in his hands, the Ram gone, driving something smaller now. He'd heard I'd settled with the city. He wanted to know if I'd put in a word on some Clovis permit tangle he'd gotten himself into, one hustler asking a favor of the woman he'd tried to break, as if a year had erased it. Behind me, through the house, I could hear the kids and Lourdes and the tres leches being cut. I looked at him on my own porch, on the property that is mine down to the 2 inches, and I did not lecture him because my mother didn't raise a lecturer. She raised a woman who keeps her paper. No, I said, just that. And I stepped back inside and put my hand on the door. In the kitchen, 40 feet away, the little hen timer, stuck at 2 minutes since the eggs that morning, humming there on the sill for hours the way it does, finally chose that second to come unstuck. And it rang, one clear, bright ding through the whole house as I shut the door on Chuck Renner for good.